Hi, my name is Wayne Brockbank. I'm here today representing the RBL Group to visit with you about an important topic of the relationship between HR transformation and the external business environment within which that transformation needs to occur. Over the last 20 years, we've done extensive research in the RBL Group on the relationship between HR practices and the business environment within which those practices occur. We have found that under conditions of low change that HR statistically has relatively little impact on business performance. However, when conditions turn turbulent and change becomes a way of life, HR then starts to have a high impact on business performance. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that we live in turbulent times where HR can have impact. The bad news is we live in turbulent times where HR can have impact. So we live in this kind of a time where we're becoming increasingly aware that nothing we do on the inside matters unless it relates to what's going on the outside of the firm. Many years ago, when I was a doctoral student, I remember having an economics professor in a doctoral class in economics scowl at the business students who were attending that class, and made a very poignant statement that I've never forgotten. He said, "Nothing you do on the inside of a firm matters at all to anybody unless it impacts people on the outside of the firm." That is, if you're doing something that you've provided a high level of supply, but there's no demand, the economic value is zero. Therefore, it's absolutely imperative as we go about transforming HR that we continually keep our sights on what is going on the outside, because we only add value to the extent to which we create value for those on the outside. That's what it means to be a full business partner, by the way. In today's business environment, one major change is that we live in a recessionary time. Obviously, the words just rattle through the airwaves on a regular basis of unbridled greed, of the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, of unregulated shadow banking systems, of collateralized debt mortgages that have created much of the chaos we live in. The debt-to-capital ratios are unacceptable. Many things are going on that have allowed for many years many people to make a lot of money. But the system was built on a house of cards. We found that not only have those practices created a disaster for us, but the question is, why have they gone unbridled? And part of that reason is that we find HR being criticized every day in the newspapers, magazines, and whatnot. Those unbridled, unregulated problems that are in the economy have been driven by enormous greed on the part of a lot of people. On the other hand, that greed has been amplified and given momentum by HR practices of unbridled compensation, sometimes irrational staffing practices. And so we're becoming increasingly aware that HR is important, but it has to relate to what's going on the outside of the firm. If not, then you find things happening like the U.S. government coming in and taking over compensation practices for companies and their staffing practices. So the good news is that HR is on the screen, but it's on the screen because we have not kept our focus on the unanticipated consequences of what we do relative to the impact of what we do on what's going on the outside of our firms. So that's one major piece in the external environment that we have to account for, obviously, in today's transformations. We live in an increasingly global world where we have to account for developing global leaders, for developing global talent, for developing a global mindset. All of those things have to be accounted for in today's strategic HR practices. The rate of technological change is unparalleled. Companies that will succeed have simply learned that they have to innovate faster than their competitors, or they'll find themselves behind the eight ball, unable to compete. We've found that there's a shift going on, obviously, from a product economy to a service economy. That has enormous implications for what we do and think about in an HR transformation. And finally, and most important, we have to be aware that customers are being given many more options because the world is becoming more competitive. And competition is coming from sources that we never would have guessed before. Microsoft now is being beleaguered by Google. General Motors, which thought it had problems with the Japanese and Korean automotive companies, now have to face Tata, out of India, who can produce a car at $2,500. They'll get they don't have the quality now, but they'll get it right and at a substantially lower cost. So the world is becoming more competitive and customers have many more choices. Therefore, in order to add value to our firms in the midst of transforming our HR practices, we must keep a focus on our customers, what customers want, what they demand, what the alternatives are that they can go to, and only when we keep an eye on the customer can we ultimately add the value. Because as my economics professor said many, many years ago, nothing we do on the inside matters unless it finally translates into money being taken out of customers' wallets and being put in our wallets instead of the wallets of our competitors. And that's the way in which we finally add value, and one of the key reasons why we must keep the external environment in mind as we go about the activities in our HR transformations. Good luck and Godspeed.